Let me set the scene. It's the 12th century. The world is, as always, a collection of people deeply convinced that their corner of it is the important one and that nothing is going to change. China is divided into rival states, each one absolutely certain it's the main character. The Islamic world is wealthy, sophisticated, and busy admiring itself in the mirror. Europe is doing its usual thing, arguing about God, not bathing, and losing teeth at an impressive rate. Everyone is operating under the cozy assumption that the worst thing that could ever happen to them is something they've already met. A neighbor, a bad harvest, the usual. It is not. The worst thing that could happen to most of these people is, right now, a kid on the freezing steppe of Mongolia, and his name is Temujin. To be fair to him, he did not start with grand plans. He started as a boy whose father got poisoned, whose own clan abandoned the family to starve in the wilderness, and who, according to several accounts, murdered his half-brother over a fish. A fish, not a kingdom, not an insult to his honor. A fish. File that away, because it's the most important character reference in this entire story. This is a man with a documented zero-tolerance policy. What came next was decades of him doing the most boring thing a violent man can possibly do, which is succeed at logistics. He united the steppe tribes, people who had spent centuries joyfully robbing each other, into one organization. And he didn't do it by being the biggest and scariest. He did it by being, infuriatingly, the best manager any of them had ever seen. He promoted people based on whether they were actually good at their jobs instead of who their dad was. A concept so radical for the time that it basically counts as witchcraft. He built a system, and in 1206 the system handed him a new business card. Genghis Khan, Universal Ruler, which is a bold title, and unlike most people who give themselves a bold title, he was about to back it up. Now, here's where everyone expects the horde, the screaming mob on horseback, chaos incarnate. And I get it. It's a fun image. It's also completely wrong, and the truth is so much worse. The Mongols weren't a mob. They were the most organized military on Earth, and it wasn't close. They were sorted into tidy units of tens, hundreds, thousands, and 10,000s, basically a spreadsheet that could kill you. They drilled. They coordinated across distances other armies couldn't even shout across. They ran a continent-spanning postal relay, an express delivery network, except the package was usually bad news. They did reconnaissance. They studied your roads, your rivers, and your family drama before they ever showed up. So they often understood your kingdom's internal politics better than you did. Imagine your enemy arriving already knowing which of your generals hate each other. That was a Tuesday for these people. So throw out the image of mindless savagery. None of it was mindless. That's the unsettling part. It was all extremely well thought out. The basic method went like this. They'd roll up to a city and make a genuinely reasonable offer. Surrender, submit, pay your taxes, and you get to live. And they meant it. The Mongols were not killing people as a hobby. They found that weird and inefficient. What they wanted was your taxes, your skilled craftsmen, and your trade routes. Submit, and congratulations, you're now a productive node in the world's largest organization. Refuse, however, and you got promoted to cautionary tale, and they were world-class at cautionary tales. A city that resisted didn't just lose. It was thoroughly unmade, and word was deliberately allowed to travel down the road to the next city, so that the next city would skip the resistance phase and go straight to opening the gates. For the Mongols, terror wasn't an emotion, it was a line item on a budget. It was cheaper to obliterate one city completely than to fight 10 cities halfway. The horror was essentially a cost-saving measure. They were doing genocide on a discount plan, and I hate that I have to put it that way, but there's no honest way around it. Now let's talk about where all this went, because he conquered a lot is the kind of understatement that should be illegal. First, the wealthy walled kingdoms of northern China, all very proud of their walls. Turns out walls are great until the other guy hires the engineers who build walls. The Mongols learned siege warfare the way they learned everything, by conquering someone who already knew it and adding them to the team. They didn't have an HR department so much as they were one with swords. Then they turned west, toward the Khwarazmian Empire, an enormous rich Islamic state sprawling across Persia and Central Asia. And this part is important because of how the war actually started. Genghis didn't even want this one. He wanted to trade. He sent a perfectly nice merchant caravan and some diplomats. A local Khwarazmian governor decided these merchants were spies and had them executed. So Genghis, showing genuine restraint, sent envoys to ask for an apology. And the Khwarazmian ruler had those envoys killed too and mailed their heads back. Now, I already told you about the fish, so you can see the problem here. There exists a very short list of people in history you should never ever provoke. And there is an even shorter, more exclusive list of people you should not provoke specifically by mailing them the severed heads of their negotiating team. The Khwarazm Shah managed to find his name on both lists in the same afternoon. The response was biblical. One of the great powers of the age was taken apart like a kid stripping a stolen car for parts. Wheels off, radio gone, frame in a ditch. Magnificent cities, centers of science and trade that had stood for centuries, were simply switched off. Some never came back. Some are, to this day, just permanently smaller than they used to be because of one man's decision about how to handle his mail, and they didn't stop. Into the Caucasus, into the lands of the Rus, where they shattered the local princes, who, in fairness, were too busy squabbling with each other to mount a united defense, because nothing says, "We are about to be conquered," like a group of leaders treating a foreign invasion as a great opportunity to settle local grudges. The Mongols sent scouting forces thousands of miles from home that casually defeated armies who had never even heard of them. Imagine getting beaten by someone whose name you don't know, who lives somewhere you can't point to, who then just rides home. After Genghis died, and he died unromantically, from injuries after falling off a horse, which is a deeply rude way for the universe to retire history's greatest conqueror. His sons and grandsons did not slow down. They pushed into Eastern Europe and beat everything thrown at them. And the only reason they didn't keep going west was that a leader back home died and everyone had to rush back for the succession drama. So Europe wasn't saved by heroism. Europe was saved by a Mongol funeral. Western civilization survived because the people about to conquer it had to go home for a family meeting about who got the big chair. That's it. That's the whole rescue. And speaking of the big chair, hold that thought, because it comes back to bite everyone. They took the rest of China. They took Baghdad, at the time arguably the smartest city on the planet, the intellectual capital of the world. And that loss is the kind of thing people were still writing sad poems about centuries later. At its peak, the empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the doorstep of Europe, the largest connected land empire there has ever been, and almost certainly ever will be. Built, basically, within one man's lifetime and his kids' overtime hours. Okay, let's get to the reason this channel exists, the number. Because somebody always asks the question, how many people died? And the real answer is the whole point of today, so stay with me. The figures are staggering. The conquests are widely associated with tens of millions of deaths, and figures in the range of tens of millions get cited routinely across the wars, the sieges, the massacres, and the famine and disease that always show up afterward. Because when you take a working society and delete the working part, people keep dying long after the soldiers leave. Some estimates go higher. As a share of the entire planet's population at the time, it ranks among the deadliest things our species has ever managed to do to itself. And now, here's the twist. Here's the thing I actually want you to walk away with. We don't know the number. Not really. Not even in the ballpark. Think about what a number like that actually requires. It requires that somebody, somewhere, was counting. It requires records, a census before, a census after, the boring, beautiful paperwork of keeping track of human beings. And in a lot of these places, the people whose entire job was to keep those records were themselves part of the body count. The scribes, the clerks, the bureaucrats. The Mongols didn't just erase populations. In the worst cases, they erased the office that would have been able to tell us how many they erased. They killed the accountants, and then we tried to ask the accountants how many people died. So every jaw-dropping figure you've ever heard about the Mongols is, underneath, an estimate stacked on top of a silence, an educated guess about an absence. The number isn't huge because someone measured it and it came back huge. The number is genuinely unknowable, and we reach for the biggest figures we've got because they're the only honest way to gesture at something whose edges we literally cannot see. That's what stays with me. Not the cities, not the heads in the mail. The fact that the worst thing about the deadliest conquests in human history might be that they were so thorough, they deleted the receipt. The empire, naturally, did not last. They never do. It fragmented into rival pieces that immediately started fighting each other. Because the one enemy a conquering family can never defeat is the overwhelming urge to fight over the inheritance. The man who built an entire system specifically to stop tribes from squabbling produced grandchildren who looked at the largest empire in history and thought, yes, but who gets the big chair? It was musical chairs, except every chair was a continent, and the music was a succession crisis. He solved tribalism so completely that his own descendants reinvented it from scratch, just with nicer furniture. I'd give you the moral here, but you already have it. You've had it since the start. Humanity's most dependable talent has never been building things. It's the other thing. We're just, every so often, terrifyingly well organized about it. Anyway, that was the Mongols. I'll be here. Unfortunately.